Okay, so hello everyone and welcome. You're seeing the lovely Tashana there, but you're listening to Kelly, who's in part of the registrar's office, who's helping to facilitate the webinar today. We appreciate you being here. It's just about 1 o'clock, and since we pressed go right at the top of the hour, we are going to give it probably a minute or so for students to join us, although I see that there were tons who are ready and raring to go. We already have 25 students with us, which is absolutely terrific. Very exciting to see that, and I know there's going to be a lot of great content coming at you in the presentation today. So we're already up to 30 students. This is a great time for all of those folks who have already joined us to grab a drink of water, perhaps get a notepad, whether that's in the physical sense or the digital sense, to make sure that you can take any notes that you of information that you'd like to get today. Totally up to you. And then we are going to get started with the official presentation momentarily, but first I'm going to do just a little bit of an overview of Zoom. So I'm seeing that it's 101, and all of our students who joined us were raring to go, which is absolutely terrific. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little overview, and then I'm going to pass it over to Tashana. So again, for all those folks that just joined us, this is Kelly speaking from the registrar's office, oh goodness. Lots of webinars these days. We thank you for joining us today to learn about off-campus housing. So it's currently Thursday, May 21st, right around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're coming at you virtually for reasons that I'm sure are unsurprising. Ryerson has shifted to an essential services model to help prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, we've put together all of these virtual sessions to share important information for prospective students and current applicants to the university, in addition to current Ryerson students. So housing is obviously something that's on many students' minds, so we are grateful that you've joined us to learn more about your options living in downtown Toronto. I'd like to share a few Zoom housekeeping tips. So first of all, please ask us questions. Tashana is the expert when it comes to off-campus housing, and she will be available to answer your questions at the end of the session, speaking to them live, as well as typing answers. So to ask a question, hover your mouse over the bottom of your Zoom window until you see a horizontal menu. The Q&A icon is labeled as such. Click on that, a dialog box should open. From there, we recommend scrolling through the answered column to see if your question has already been asked and answered, because that saves everyone a whole lot of time. If it has not yet been addressed, you can type in your question. We also ask that you only submit your question once. We have a lot of students joining us today and a smaller number of staff. It's just me and Tashana, so it may take us a few minutes to get back to you, and we thank you for your patience. If you are having any issues with your video or audio, you can submit a question through the Q&A box to give us more details. That way a member of our team can troubleshoot with you. In addition, please note that you can arrange your screen in a way that works for you. You can go into full screen mode, have the presenter's video and the screen side by side, or any number of a variety of configurations. How you arrange your screen doesn't impact anyone else's view, so please feel free to adjust the windows as you see fit. Please remember, you will get a copy of this recorded webinar over email tomorrow with an audio transcript as well to ensure accessibility for all of our audiences. From there, I'm going to pass it over to Tashana to talk about off-campus housing. Take it away, Tashana.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, so my name is Tashana McDonald, and I'm the off-campus housing facilitator here at Ryerson. So first, I want to just acknowledge the land that Ryerson currently occupies. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So what is off-campus housing? So what we do is we teach students how to navigate Toronto's complicated rental market, as well as just providing search tips and strategies for finding affordable and safe housing, which is what we're doing today. We connect students with property listings and home rental landlords, educate students about tenant rights and responsibilities, review student leases and provide insights into tenant law, and refer students to legal aid and resources if needed. So we have a really great website. You can check it out at ryerson.ca/renting, where we provide resources, links, things that we'll be talking about today, as well as additional information that you might find resourceful and helpful along the road. All right, so your search and your rights. So the goal of this session is to help you create an action plan so you can find housing that suits your need. So we'll be going over what you should budget for, what you should search for, if you should wait before you arrive or after, how do you find roommates, and where to do your search, as well as should you commute or not. So here's a timeline in finding a place. So we first want to just start by determining your needs. What housing type you want to live in, what neighborhood you're considering, what your budget will look like, as well as if you'll need a guarantor, and if so, who will that be, as well as roommates. When you're planning for roommates, you'll just want to know that if you are living with another roommate, just knowing the number helps you, because then you can do a specific search when you are searching for apartments. When you're searching for apartments, you want to be as specific as possible. So if I know that I will be rooming with one other person, then I might just put 2-bedroom apartment downtown Toronto, and then I'll see what comes up. If I am doing 3 or more, then you still want to be specific, because you want to make sure that as you're doing your searches, you specify how many rooms you would like and where that location is. It's helpful because if you're just looking for apartments downtown, then you get a large number of pop-ups that come up, and it varies from studios, 1-bedrooms to 4-bedrooms. So you want to make sure that you have a specific number. So it's good to know and plan for roommates ahead of time before you start searching for apartments. Then you'll set up viewings. So contact the landlord and property manager to make an appointment to view the unit or use a property viewing service. Then you'll submit a rental application, which is formally place an offer to rent the unit by completing the rental application form. After that, you're ready to sign a lease, which is legally committing in writing to the terms of your rental agreement, and then after that, you'll move in. I just want to make a note that before you submit your rental application, I like to have all my information set beforehand, even before I do viewings. The rental application will just consist of information that is required. So whether you're a Ryerson student, proof of income and payments and things like that. They might ask for a credit history or report, and that might also be asked from your guarantor if you don't have it or can't provide one. So all that information I like to just put in a document or a folder, so that when I do set up viewings and I am interested in a place, then the application process is smooth and I don't have to go around and searching for pieces, because normally it's a 1 to 3 day grace period in terms of finding a place and then possibly getting approved for that place. So you just want to have everything set beforehand. So renting 101. Most leases in Toronto are 12-month and start at the first of the month. Toronto's rental market is very competitive and expensive. Scams are real. Student housing buildings can ask for money up front, but regular landlords are limited in what they can ask for, so keep your cash close. With that being said, even though most leases are 12 months, it isn't irregular to find an 8-month lease or a shorter lease if you want. There are short-term leases and long-term leases. All right, so determine your needs. What type of housing do you want? Do you want dedicated student residence housing, a room in a shared house, basement apartment in a house, an entire house or condo or traditional apartment building? So dedicated student residence housing is residency leases available in addition to amenities. These places include some of the places like our sponsors, Parkside, Campus Commons, Campus One, or Harrington Housing. They often come partially or fully furnished. Apartment buildings are buildings owned by developers that are rented out as self-contained private residences. Apartment style houses, typically a house that is owned by one or more persons, can be rented out entirely or commonly divided by floor levels and rented as separate apartments. So for an apartment style house, from my experience, when I was a student, I actually lived in this type of apartment, and I occupied the main floor with a roommate. So it was a 2-bedroom. The upper levels had about 3 to 4 bedrooms, and then the basement was a separate unit that was 2 bedrooms. With that, we all had our separate entrances, and then we just shared our garbage area as well as where our laundry was. So it is common to find places like that as well. Places like that are normally on Granby Street, McGill Street, or sometimes in Kensington Market. Condos are individually owned apartment complex that is rented out. It can include different types of amenities and storage lockers, as well as often on-site security. Rooms, an individual room rented out, and any of the previous options often includes access to common spaces and shared bathroom, and can be short-term or long-term. There's also homestays, which is a shared residence and culture exchange with a local individual or family, which is called a host, and a visiting student. Most meals are not mandatory, but some students will select a homestay with meals included. Great options for international and exchange students, and can have short or long-term stay options. Check out services like Home Adorma if you're interested. All right, one of the big questions is, should you commute? This is dependent on your needs. So depending on how many classes you have downtown, you might want to commute a couple days as opposed to every single day. Some students who have a higher workload might want to be closer to campus, so they'll find a place closer to the downtown core. We are located in the downtown core, so at the bottom of the screen you see downtown there. The campus is close to Yonge and Dundas, which is close to Dundas Station as well as College Station. Living downtown is usually the goal of most students, as it is close to campus and often a lot is happening. The closer downtown, the more competitive and harder to find affordable housing. Many Ryerson students do commute. We are a commuter school, so it isn't uncommon for a student to commute. There are many locations that you can commute from. So on the right side of the screen, you'll see Scarborough, and a lot of Scarborough Metro stations or stops like Kennedy, Warden, Midland, Scarborough Town, or McCowan could be around an hour commute. This also depends on rush hour. So if it is a time between rush hour, then it could pose for a higher commute, and that's taking the TTC transit. There's also the West End and Etobicoke, which is like Keele, Rumidee, Old Mill, Royal York, Kipling, and the Keele area, which can sometimes be 40 minutes. And this again depends on traffic, rush hour, and things like that. You can consider walking to school from your place, biking, taking TTC, or also go buses and go transit, go trains. All right, so what should you budget for? I always tell students to be realistic and reasonable. Short-term furnished houses tend to be the most expensive, so budget on the higher end for that. A room in a shared house would be $600 to $1,100 per month. A bachelor could be $1,500 to $2,000 a month. A one bedroom could be $1,800 to $2,800 a month. A two bedroom could be $2,400 to $3,500 a month. And a three bedroom could be $3,800 to $5,000 a month. You also want to consider that you could be living with roommates, so these numbers would be divided amongst the roommates. Other prices to consider are hydro and water, which is like things like your utilities. Hydro could be $50 and up, depending on your electricity usage. Water could be $20 to $40 a month, depending on your water usage. Internet, $35 to $70 a month, depending on plan. Insurance could be $12 to $30, and that depends on the provider. And groceries could be $40 to $100 per week, $300 per month, and that varies per person, or if you'll be splitting that amongst your roommates. And then other things to consider are your other living costs. So things like books, supplies, and entertainments. You want to make sure that your budget, you're creating a budget that not only covers rent, but your other monthly expenses, whether that's hygiene, things that you need, any other supplies that you know that are reoccurring, or just a just in case. Utilities often mean electricity, gas, and water. So sometimes that is included in the price. Often it isn't. And if it's not, then you'll be required to pay your rent plus utility bills. You'll have to have a talk with your landlord, because sometimes utilities will also include internet and basic cable, but that's not always the case. So you just want to double check with your landlord when they say utilities are included or not. What I like to do too is, if they say utilities aren't included, I like to ask the question of, okay, in the winter, what's the kind of average rate or the highest point that often gets to? That will give me an idea of what I'll be paying in the winter months. I don't really ask for the summer, because I know that the summer will be lower than the winter will be. All right, so plan for roommates. How do you find the right roommates? So a lot of times people will ask friends and family to be a roommate with them. If that's the case, just knowing who you're rooming with is good. If you don't, I always like to just suggest doing a roommate compatibility checklist. This just allows you to be in line with your roommate. So just knowing what your schedules will be like. They don't have to be the same schedules, but you want to make sure that they don't collide and that you guys are understanding the agreement that you're getting into. So you want to have conversations about when the bills will be paid. So for some, they want to pay rent together. So one person might pay the rent, and then the other person will give the other person that rent money, so that everything could just be paid together as opposed to being submitted separately. You want to ask if, hydro will be shared together. Maybe your roommate pays for internet and you pay for cable, or you go grocery shopping and you buy these items and your roommate buys these items and just constantly replenishes them. Or if you guys both buy your separate groceries, you want to have those conversations so that you know that you're in agreement, so that down the road things don't come up and surprise you, because when you do sign a lease, it is very hard to get out of. You're your roommates are considered under one tenancy as opposed to individually. So if there was two of you and for some reason down the line, one of you wanted to leave, both of you would most likely have to leave unless your landlord was okay with the situation. But most of the times you do count as one tenancy as opposed to being divided. The roommate can hand over tenancy, but even with that, most of the times your landlord might not be in agreement with that. So here's just the checklist. This can be found on the website as well. All right, and then you want to create a roommate agreement. So in addition to your lease, you just want to make sure that you and your roommate are agreeing to the things that you guys said, expectations, standards, and things like that, and then just agreeing to where you're living, the address, include the landlord's name, and then you guys sign it. So for your students' summer subleasing. So a lot of students who, down the line might have a 12-month lease, but then for some reason in the summer either want to travel or go back home. Summer subleasing is an option because you would sublease your apartment to somebody else. The only thing is that you're still responsible for your rent. So in that case, it's an option. Say you want to, sublease or sublet your apartment for a month or 2 months in that summer months. What you want to do is first you have to let your landlord know. Your landlord can't deny without a good reason, but you have to let them know just so that they know for the safety of, the person that's staying there as well as you, who that person is. You can set it up where whoever subleasing is paying the landlord directly, or it will have to go through you. So the subleaser will pay you and you pay your landlord as you would normally pay your rent. Searching in the private market. So where do you start looking? So you can start looking at websites called placesforstudents.com. Here you can find listings of places that are available, as well as create a profile if you're looking for a roommate. So you can create a profile and connect with other people who are looking for roommates as well. Some other places to look are Bun's Home Zone, which is on Facebook. It has a bit of a setup in terms of just a questionnaire just to verify and make sure that everything's good. But after that point, you can use that. There's Geico.com, harringtonhousing.com, homestay.com, padmapper, realtor.ca, roomies.ca, U of T's Housing Finder, as well as Ucasa. There's a few more as well, and you can kind of check out our website if you want more information on those ones. If you live off campus, you can still choose to get the Ryerson Community Meal Plan. So if you are living in an apartment and you still, wanted the meal plan that was on campus, you can opt into that. All right, so how to de-stress the search. Treat your housing search like a job search. So you want to be persistent, you want to be flexible, and understand the process and be prepared. We say be persistent and flexible because a lot of the times it can be a continuous process. Being flexible because everyone has different schedules. So you might, have a couple viewings in one day or schedule another day, or somebody cancels because they're coming out of town to either show you the apartment or give you the keys or things like that. So just be flexible and understand that the process can be sometimes tedious, but it's worth it. Avoid scams, so verify. So I always say when you're verifying and you're looking, just make sure you look at pictures and make sure there's multiple pictures. A lot of the times people might post one image of just a random building and we'll put information at the bottom of that saying, oh, apartment available and things like that. You want to have more information than just one picture to verify. A lot of times people will look at it and think that it's a good option, but most of the times if it has one image, it's probably not a valid listing. Keep your cash close, check the place out, understand the market, and keep your guard up. So for check the place out, it works differently in terms of COVID-19. You can still do viewings, just be safer and precautious, but you also might want to do virtual viewings. So with that, say I'm showing you a place, I might just take you around and show you the place virtually. And what I would do is, even though I'm seeing it virtually, I would just make sure that if I apply for it and I do get approved and I'm getting ready to sign a lease, that I ask to see the place in person upon signing the lease. If you want to just, do multiple viewings online, that's okay. But I just always still suggest that when it gets time to actually move into the place or sign the lease, you want to make sure that you at least see the place in person once before signing that lease. All right, so setting up viewings. What if I'm not in town to do the viewing? So with this, we tell students to sign with a student residence building, only because then you get virtual tours online. You can see the room styles that they have and just what they offer. It can all be done through one service. If not, then you can always ask someone you trust who is able to do the viewing. This might not be the option for a lot of people, but if you have family or close friends that are downtown or even just a little bit outside of the city, then they can do the viewing for you later on and just take pictures or show you videos. Or you can just set aside some time to visit a few weeks or a month in advance and do multiple viewings. So, you know, if you wanted to, you can just set a date where, okay, we're going to drive downtown to look at multiple viewings that we've set up. Or if you do them virtually and you've decided that you're going to, and everything is approved for an application, then you want to view it before you sign the lease, or the same day that you're signing the lease. You could be like, can I just see the place before I sign that lease? How do you set up a viewing? So contact the landlords by email or phone to request to see the unit in person. Be professional and mature. Provide your availability and plan to be flexible. Be prepared to apply for the unit immediately after viewing. So the third part is very important because a lot of the times there's other people who are viewing apartments as well. So you want to make sure that if you do like a place, that you send and submit that application as soon as you can. That's why I talked about before having all that information that you needed beforehand so that you could submit it all at once, as opposed to you having your information but you possibly waiting for your guarantor's information and things like that. And a guarantor is somebody who co-signs your lease and will most likely be a parent or guardian. A lot of times they ask for this beforehand, and this person agrees to be responsible to pay your rent if you cannot pay for your rent. So you want to make sure that you ask your guarantor upfront beforehand and don't put their name on, just assuming that they'll take on this responsibility. Also, you want to bring your apartment viewing checklist, which we've provided on our site, as well as in the next slide. So this is the apartment viewing checklist. This you can bring to the viewing, or you can take a picture of, or just keep in mind some of the major things. But what I like to do is I like to bring a phone or camera to take pictures of just the layout of things, so that one, I know what pieces of furniture I might need to bring in, or the size of the place, or just even the condition that the place is in before I moved into it. I like to bring a phone charger. I like to check the outlets to just make sure that the outlets are working. Sometimes there's some circuits that are cut off or just don't work because of the configuration. So you just want to make sure that things are working and running and that you don't have any problems or issues later on. There's other things that you can ask for in terms of just checking to make sure that the water pressure is good in the bathroom and in the kitchen. You can ask other questions here in terms of utilities. You might want to ask questions about where the garbage is. If you're in a house, the garbage is most likely taken out bi-weekly, as well as the recycling bi-weekly. So you want to make sure you know what day that will happen, as well as if it's your responsibility to take that out, or if your landlord would do that for you. In apartment buildings, it's different. You'll have a garbage chute where you can put your stuff. The only difference is there are some buildings that might have recycling downstairs or actually in the garbage chute unit on your floor. So those are things to consider and ask about. You can ask questions like, is there air conditioning? If there isn't air conditioning, then you would have to bring your fan if it does get hot in the summer months for you, depending on where you live. You might want to ask where the washer and dryer is if it is not on in-suite laundry. So if it's not in a house, then it might be in the basement, and it might be shared amongst a group or like whoever's in the house, the tenants in the house. With that, it could be free, or you might have to pay a fee, like it might be coin laundry. If there's not en-suite laundry, then and it's not in the building at all, so like it's not in the apartment building or it's not in the house, then you'll have to go to a laundry chute, like a laundry mat to go to do everything. So those are kind of just like some of the questions. You can go into depth in this checklist to just go through the things that are great to ask. And you can do a landlord Q&A. Like I said, you don't have to bring the sheet with you. Sometimes it can get intimidating and overwhelming if you bring the sheet and you're asking your landlord question for question. So what I do is I look at the list, kind of keep in mind what questions I want to ask. And then during the whole process of me viewing the place, I might ask, okay, so who do I contact for, maintenance and things like that? Your landlord might tell you it's them, or they might give you another number who would be the point of contact. There might be cases as well where management will handle that. So you might have a management office in your building or, close to your building where you contact them for any daily routine occurrences or maintenance, things like that. You want to keep this in mind because a landlord might be the point of contact, and if they are, then they might have more open hours for when things can get done. Whereas if you are going to management, a lot of management offices do have office hours. So a lot of the times it's a 9 to 5. There might be one day where they stay a little bit later for tenants just in case anything happens, but they do work within business hours, whereas landlords sometimes will be open to, you know, coming on the weekend or coming after they finish work or after you finish school, things like that. So keep those things in mind. All right, so submitting a rental application. How do you prepare for the rental application? So what you would do is you plan to pay rent, the funds for first and last month's rent deposit, as well as the key deposit, and your official letter from Ryerson. There's also things like your credit report and your credit score. If you don't have that, then that's more so the information that your guarantor will provide. They might also ask for pay stubs, whether that's from you or your guarantor as well. So what can a landlord ask? A landlord can ask questions related to the tenancy as long as it does not infringe on your rights. A landlord cannot ask personal questions that infringe on your rights under the Ontario Human Rights Code. Signing a lease. So please get your leases in writing. As of April 2018, there's a standard lease form that is required for landlords to provide to their tenants, and that will include legal names of the landlord and tenant, emergency contact information for landlord and tenant, address of the rental property, the term of the rental period, agreed upon rent amount and due date, the amount in terms of the first and last month's rent, as well as the conditions for leases. So they'll have the standard lease forms, and if there are any additional conditions, then that will be submitted on another form, but it's right behind the lease, and it will say on the lease that there's another form stating whatever other conditions there are. Here's the example, or not the example, but here's the standard form that they would be required to provide you. So as you can see, it's here. You can also find these links in our website as well, or on our websites. What are your rights and responsibilities as a tenant? So most applicable in the private rental market, student housing buildings have some exceptions around security deposit, application fees, and move-out dates. So just touching on those, if you live in a student housing buildings, there might be different ways you may make payments. So you might be doing installments as opposed to monthly rent. So keep those things in mind and figuring out what works best for you. In some cases, if you're doing a student housing building, they'll ask for money up front, which they can. There are also other application fees and things like that. Your right as a tenant. So as a tenant, you are most likely protected under the Ontario Residential Tenancy Act, the RTA. The RTA sets rules and regulations for landlords and tenants, including rent increases, evictions, repairs, and many other issues that affect the tenants. There's a great website called Steps to Justice, and it contains commonly asked legal questions about renting situations, along with clear explanations. So it's nice because the way it's laid out is you can navigate to find a question, but then they also have it laid out where you can actually click and see what the next steps are. So if you're figuring out to contact your landlord, it will tell you how you should contact your landlord. And then if that doesn't happen, then what to do next, which is nice because a lot of times you find that you have to look in other places to navigate through finding the question, your follow-up question. So what is required of your landlord? So contact information for regular maintenance and emergencies. We encourage you to put all requests in writing. A signed copy of your lease. She or he cannot make you sign a lease after you have moved in. If you do not have to sign one before you move in, then they cannot insist you sign one later on. Ensuring your unit complies with health and safety housing and maintenance standards. So you do not have to take an apartment as is. You can request maintenance and your landlord is responsible for making repairs to bring it up to standard. And then access to vital services. Your landlord legally may not withhold or deliberately interfere with any vital services that she or he is obligated to provide, including hydro, gas, heat, and water. So they have to give you a document entitled Information for New Tenants on or before the new tenancy begins. This document is issued by the Landlord and Tenant Board and outlines your rights and responsibilities as a tenant and the contact information. She or he may not ask for a security deposit or damage deposit. They're not legal in Ontario. If you pay a deposit, it may be only applied to the last month's rent. And then student residents are the exception. And then you want to ensure the transfer of keys to the unit. The landlord should turn over the key to your unit when you pay the deposit and sign the lease. Make sure to test out the key to make sure everything is fine and it's working. All right, so as a tenant, again, you have the right to a safe home. Your home must be in safe and good repair. This is true even if you knew about the problems before you agreed to rent the home. So if there's any repairs that need to be done, then you would just, in writing, just contact your landlord and just let them know. Vital services, you must have access to heat, hot and cold water, electricity, fuel, such as natural gas. Your landlord cannot shut off these services, even if you have not paid your rent. Your landlord may shut off services for a short time so that they can make repairs. Heat, your landlord must heat your home from September 1st to June 15th in Toronto. The landlord has to keep the heat to 20 degrees Celsius minimum. And then privacy. Your landlord can enter your home only for certain reasons. For example, your landlord can enter your home to make repairs or to show the home to possible tenants or emergencies. And even in this case, they may enter upon these exceptions, but they just have to give you about 24 hours notice so that you know that they'll be entering the unit. All right, so what are you responsible for prior to moving in? Be prepared to be committed. Once you sign a lease or pay a deposit, no matter how small, you are bound to that apartment. Application forms can be binding, so you want to make sure that you want to live in that apartment, and if you are with roommates, you want to make sure that you want a room with that person before you sign anything or hand any money over. When you pay your key deposit, the total amount must be no more than the cost of replacing the key. Make sure to get a receipt for this. This amount should be refunded to you upon move out. Pay your first and last month's rent. A landlord may ask for this amount up front, and you are required to pay it before moving in. A landlord may not ask for a security or damage deposit. And then just ask for a rent receipt, and that should include the amount of rent you paid, the time period, as well as to where it was. For paying so you want to make sure that when you're paying up front, it's going to be first month's rent, last month's rent deposit. So that last month's rent is most likely going to be the rent amount, and it will be applied to your last month's rent. If there are any damages or things like that, then that's something that you and your landlord will have to discuss so that they make accordance whether you might be paying a fee. So say, for instance, you leave a whole bunch of stuff in the place when you move out, you might be charged a cleaning fee for that, but that cannot be taken out of your last month's deposit. That's an external expense. All right, so take photos of the unit prior to move-in. Be sure to document any pre-existing damages or maintenance issues. Email these to yourself or your landlord as a record. Book the elevator for move out and move in. Make sure you have agreed on a move-in date with your landlord and the current tenants. If you are moving into a building with an elevator, you will likely need to reserve the elevator for a specific window of time. Please note that also with booking an elevator, you'll most likely need to put down a deposit. This could be a little bit less or more than $200. It's just you'll provide a check stating the amount, and most likely if everything goes well and you don't damage either the elevator or say the hallway leading up to the elevator, then you'll be giving back your full deposit. If there are damages, then you might be required to pay some of those damage costs. Your landlord may request that you arrange a transfer of accounts to your name for Toronto Hydro, which is the most common, and to provide proof of tenant's insurance, which we'll talk about shortly. If you are required to pay your utility bills and you are not paying that amount to your landlord directly, then that's where the Toronto Hydro account will come in, so that you'll be paying your monthly rents as well as your utilities. So that will be an extra cost. If utilities aren't included, but your landlord is saying, okay, pay that amount, but give it to me and I'll pay the hydro company, then what you want to do is just ask for them to provide you with whatever that monthly statement looks like so that you know the amount that you have to pay or the percentage. Say, for example, when I was at Ryerson, I was on the main floor of a house. So we had multiple people sharing the hydro usage. So what we did is we all paid a certain percent, and our landlord would send us the bill notice, tell us our percentage, and then we would just give our landlord that money when we handed our rent payments over. We strongly encourage all Ryerson students living off campus to ensure they have tenants insurance. So it exists to help renters protect their personal property by helping to replace the contents of their apartments in the event of loss, theft, or damage. It covers personal liability, accidental damage to others' property, or if someone gets hurt in your home. It may also include living expenses should loss or damage force you to live elsewhere. And then sometimes your parents or guardians' home insurance will extend to cover, your post-secondary students. So you want to just double check and see if they have any extra coverage. If not, you can call an insurance company provider, or you can check with your bank because sometimes they include it as well, or they offer it. And when you're checking with these, just mention that you're a student because some places have student rates and student discounts. If you require your own independent tenants insurance, call around to various insurance firms to get some quotes. And you can go to multiple firms to get quotes. So say you go to 5 firms, a lot of times what they'll do is they will hold the quote for maybe say 24 to 48 hours. And if say you don't decide that you want that one, then it just will be deleted. And if you do want it, then you would just let them know that you are, committing to that one, and then they'll hold the quote that they gave to you. Because a lot of times this number can change weekly or daily. So it's good to just kind of like look around to see what the rates could be. All right, and don't forget to check out our website. You can find more information there. Again, it is ryerson.ca/renting. We're here to support your search for finding a place to live off campus. You can connect with us by email at offcamp@ryerson.ca. So you can ask any questions there. You can also set up a one-on-one appointment through that same email as well, and we can talk there. Follow us on social media to stay connected and updated. So Twitter is ru_housing, and Instagram is ruhousing. If you want to check out the residences for Ryerson, they're doing a Q&A tomorrow on Instagram Live, so check it out there. All right, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that great presentation, Tashana. So helpful because there are so many intricacies to the Toronto housing market. I know that we were getting a lot of questions on the back end, some of which I answered, but we have a couple of questions here that I'm hoping I can ask you since you're the expert. We have Kimberly here who's asked a couple of questions that I wanted to definitely get the experts' opinions on. The first one is, how much time on average does it usually take from the viewing to all of the signing of the contracts?
Okay. Hi, Kimberly. Great question. So I'm just going to talk about the dates for searching. So I normally tell students to look 44 to 60 days in advance of or before the time that they're planning to move in. This just gives you enough time to be searching. A lot of the times, because the Toronto rental market is so competitive, you're not going to see postings like months in advance where other smaller towns or cities might have. You're competing with the public as well. So with that, I would say 44 to 60 days before you intend to move in is a great range to start looking. So you can, and it depends, you can find a place and things work out, and within that week, you can end up signing a lease. For some, it might take weeks on end or even a month, depending on what they're looking for, who they're looking with. That's why it's just best to be very specific in your process, because if you say you're looking with another roommate, but then a third person comes on last minute, then now you have to adjust the specific requirements that you're looking for, and that might change the dynamics of your search.
Okay, wonderful answer. So there's so many factors at play here.
Yeah.
Another great question. Are there any additional questions or requirements from renters from outside Ontario? Is there anything else that they have to sort of bring to the table?
Not necessarily. Sometimes the guarantor part could be one of the biggest challenges in terms of just knowing that the guarantor is with an account or credit history with a Canadian bank is what they'll normally look for. Some landlords, you can actually negotiate and talk with them and just let them know the case. In that case, they might ask for, proof of income or just showing that you'll be able to make those payments for rent. A lot of landlords will try and take advantage of international students and will ask for months in advance of rent. It is not legal in Canada, in Ontario. So you want to make sure that you know your rights for those cases. If you do want to pay up front, that's more of your decision, but they can only ask for first month's rent and last month's deposit, as well as a key deposit. And then I think those are the main things for that.
Awesome, thank you. Another question sort of on the topic of, international or out of province students here. Can you sign the lease before you move in? And if so, can that happen virtually in some way? The student is saying
Yeah.
that they're coming from out of the country and may have to self-quarantine due to COVID-19 before they can get to Toronto.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. For those cases, I would just normally request doing that with like a student, like student dedicated housing. With that, you know that you'll get virtual tours. There's other agreements that you would go through, and they have all their agreements as well. With private landlords, you can do that where they send you the lease. You've seen the place virtually, and you feel comfortable. You can sign the lease virtually, but it just becomes a challenge that if you do sign a lease and then you get to the place and you're not happy with it, you're already bound to that agreement, and you want to make sure that you keep proof of everything. So if for some reason you do make those payments, that you're keeping track of those payments, you're keeping track of the person's name, verifying, having emails, things like that. Because if you're signing beforehand in the private market, then it can be just a bit challenging in terms of verifying who those people are. Whereas like if you're signing with a student housing building, then you know that you can see layouts of the apartments as well as like other options. And great options too are either housing buildings, or you can do homestays, because then you also have, say, your own room in somebody's place, and you'll have it'll be provided service through a company as opposed to them being a private landlord.
Absolutely. So I think there's just a little bit there's a bit of muscle behind that, right? There's sort of a credibility and a legitimacy that you might not get with someone you just kind of find privately.
Exactly.
Awesome. So thank you so much. I want to just thank Kimberly for submitting those questions. Those were really, really great questions. And I think that some things that were probably on a lot of students' minds as well. Of course, we have so many international and out of province students here at Ryerson, and things are different in these days. There are additional considerations to come to terms with, considering the current situation with the pandemic. So those are all of the questions that we had submitted as of now. So at this point, I'd like to thank Tashana for the terrific presentation, so comprehensive. I know I learned a lot as an adult who lives in Toronto. It was great tips for me too. So what's going to happen now is we are going to shut down the video and the audio, so you're not going to see us or hear us anymore, but we'll still be online until the end of the hour to answer any questions you have. Please feel free to continue to submit your questions until that time. This is also a general reminder that you will receive a recorded copy of this webinar over email tomorrow. However, you will not receive a transcript of the Q&A. So if you got an answer to your question in the Q&A, please make a note of what that answer was before the session is over. I want to flag really quickly that I got a couple of questions about on-campus housing. So of course, the focus of today's session was off-campus housing, but I did reply to those students with the email address housing, HOUSING, at ryerson.ca, because that is a great contact point for questions about living on campus. Now, on behalf of Ryerson University, I would like to thank Tashana for the great presentation on behalf of the off-campus housing department, and I would like to thank you for joining us. We hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and well during these uncertain times, and we look forward to keeping in touch. Bye now.